Turkmenistan is one of the most secretive countries in the world and is very hard to visit. However, you can go through Ashgabat without getting a visa by visiting on a layover with Turkmenistan Airlines. So here's my honest review of the airline. First of all, the booking process. We found this very easy. However, your mileage may vary, as there are several different websites you can actually use to book with Turkmenistan Airlines, and they don't always work. What we did is we used Skyscanner first to identify the flight and then booked it directly on the website. As I said, your mileage may vary, but we found this a good experience. So I'd say 8 out of 10. Now the check-in, I would say a 10 out of 10 for this one. The check-in was very smooth. You do have to get there a little bit in advance. We got there 4 hours in advance, but they checked us in easily, and there was no problem there. So after a brief stint in the lounge, we could begin our boarding process. So we were just waiting a little bit to board the flight to Ashgabat. Then we boarded the flight along this jet bridge. We got into the plane, and the plane is a nice new Boeing 777 new and modern plane. So we entered, and this is where things got a little bit more weird. So the plane itself is very nice. The flight from London to Ashgabat tends to be quite empty. And it's just that you have really quite a lot of stuff related to the Turkmen president aboard the plane. So the in-flight magazine is very strange. You have about 10 pages of information about the Turkmen president's state visits, his relationships with other surrounding countries, so you will learn a lot about Central Asian and Caucasus type of politics. So then there was a safety video, and we were watching some different in-flight entertainment. We watched this Turkmen cartoon where we saw this little boy learn some kind of lesson. I'm still not really sure what the lesson was. He was kind of throwing a ball around, and then they were hanging out with some adults in the neighborhood, but it was cool, however, to see some of the typical sort of features of Turkmen house and things like that. Then we saw this music video. So this guy is driving a branded Turkmenistan flag, Bugatti, around Ashgabat. You have quite an interesting selection of in-flight entertainment. You can definitely get a good sense of what Ashgabat looks like from the in-flight entertainment. So we also watched a couple documentaries on the plane. You could watch some historical stuff. This is also a video about the streets of Ashgabat, the different types of traditional dancing that they have, the very striking skyline with all the lights and all of the gold statues, very flashy and very expensive. Now, the food was a low point, I'm not going to lie. The food on Turkmenistan Airlines is really grim. We had this sort of dry cracker thing, so this was really a low point. This weird biscuit with the jelly inside, you can see Will's weird facial expression as he eats. It was a little bit disgusting. So I'm going to give the food maybe a 3 out of 10. Now back to the entertainment. So I'm going to give the entertainment actually a 10 out of 10 because I found it very interesting. This is a story called Güzel Alma. It's a story about apples, which tend to be important in Central Asian culture in general, which is why we were drinking a lot of apple juice on the flight. We also watched Smallfoot, which is an animated movie about a hermit kingdom. So watching it on Turkmenistan Airlines was a little bit odd, but looking out the window, you see Turkmenbashi as we went over Turkmenistan airspace, and it's kind of beautiful. When we landed, finally, you can see a little bit of the airport here. It's an incredible airport in the shape of a falcon, and the whole thing is made of white marble and has these gold accents and green, and I love the color scheme. It's totally like the Turkmenistan flag, which is super cool. And the airport experience was very normal. Now, I expected this to be super weird because we were told by the gate attendant that we'd be met by secret police and all this stuff, and none of that actually happened. What happened is that we got off the plane, there was a sign that said, I heart Ashgabat, so you could feel very much like a regular tourist. And keep in mind that this was at 2 a.m. Everything in the airport was open. So this was a bizarre experience going around to all these restaurants and gift shops, having a very ordinary time. The one thing is that we had to pay in cash and in US dollars, and luckily we had read this beforehand and we're ready to go be there with our US dollars. This is Will trying a pastry. Most of the pastries have some kind of mystery meat in them. Don't try to ask them what the meat it is. They don't really know how to explain it to you. It's just meat. So I did manage to get a pastry with potato and also these potato chips with dill. If you're a vegetarian, Turkmenistan is not the friendliest country. On the flight itself, there was just chicken or beef. We were also able to go to this gift shop and see all these different gifts, usually themed with themes like horses and other Turkmen themes. You can also get those fuzzy Turkmen hats if you're interested in that. So it was a very sort of normal airport experience. Everything was open. So after our 2 hours at the airport, we boarded the next flight, which was Ashgabat to Bangkok. And getting on the plane, the experience was similar. Here we can see the air traffic control tower, which I heard that the original one was actually in the wrong place, and they've now replaced it with a different one, which is built in the correct place. You can read all about all these facts on the in-flight entertainment screen. So you can see the lights of Ashgabat as you go out, including all the famous marble buildings that you see on all those YouTubers' videos. And now we're ready to fly to Bangkok. We flew over for a few hours over Iran, Burma, and India. And finally, we arrived in Bangkok Airport. This concludes the flight experience with Turkmenistan Airlines. So overall, I'm going to give the airline a 7 out of 10. Everything was pretty good except for the food. So that's my review of Turkmenistan Airlines.